Decks, your source for Warhammer Underworlds, and under 30 things that you thought were worthy of knighthood, but we're really just picking a mushroom in the woods. I'm your co-host, Davey, and with me is my co-host, Phil. Phil, how are you doing?
Hey, doing pretty good.
Little addled by the bad moon?
Yeah, bad moon, some bad mushrooms, all all going.
All of the above. Hey, as you may be able to tell, we are covering the Looncourt, and we're also tacking on a little bit of Fearsome Fortress coverage as well. For context, it is December 4th, which is only 4 days after I actually recorded the last ep with all the rest of the crew. We should say this episode is made possible by Games Workshop sending us a preview copy of the Looncourt and of the Fearsome Fortress deck. That the latter of the two just dropped in our lap like a hot second ago, and so kind of jumbled up a little plans for exactly how we would run this episode. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. You already know mostly what the heck's been going on with me since I just told you 4 days ago in my time, and really just a week ago in listeners' time if they're doing it. This is the rare episode where we break from that bi-monthly, every other week format, which we flex to do if there's something newsworthy.
New releases coming in hot.
Yep. Super hot. Phil, but what the heck's been going on with you?
Yeah, not a ton. I did finally get back out to League. I also just got my Gnarlwood box. A lot of the stores in town sold out right away, and I was like, I'll just wait for them to get more. I won't like put in an online order or anything. They'll have more. And then 2 weeks later, they still didn't have any. So I was like, I think I've just gotta order one. And then of course, like, at League, I saw that they did have one on the shelf. So it's like, oh, well, I guess I could have waited one more week, but it was only a couple more days. So I ended up getting it. I can finally start building with the new cards. Obviously, I've been looking at that stuff. Still have been playing Spike Claws pretty much exclusively since rotation.
You had a rat off at League, didn't you?
Yeah, an epic rat battle, if you will. Which was an interesting game. I was playing without a lot of the new stuff, though, so I had some pretty suboptimal cards in there. I was still playing with some delve stuff, so...
Okay. I remember seeing that. I was like, wow, interesting choice.
It wasn't what I wanted to have in the deck. I just hadn't updated it yet because I didn't have like any of the new cards to update it with. So instead of run a bunch of proxies, I was like, I'll just run it back out again. We'll see how it does.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, as if no one knew this, but delve is not good anymore. You can still score the cards, but staggering your fighters sucks.
You kept it close enough. I think I was watching for some of it. You had a route to victory up until late in the second round, and then like a Hail Mary in the third round.
Yep. Yeah, it was really close. The total score I think was like, I want to say it was like 15-13 or something like that.
Okay.
Maybe it was more, but either way, it was good, and it was interesting to see the rats fight into each other.
Sure. Yeah. I remember coming back and noticing that Scritch had died despite being inspired with Weighty Blessing. It's like, oh no. Yeah. That's not good when you're playing against the assassin rats who it's basically guaranteed collateral damage for him.
Yeah. I think he scored 5 glory off that kill.
Oh no. Does that include collateral damage or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was like get the kill and then some surges, and then also eventually get collateral damage. And it was like, it might have even been more than, actually, now that I think about it. But either way, it was big. But yeah, it's been fun. I kind of want to get back to Stalkers, but I feel like with all the ping out there right now, they're going to be kind of in a bad spot. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's a maybe a topic for our soon to be put out the debate episode is the ins and outs of ping is what's the effect of that on the game. I have this theory that Swarm warbands are not as worried about ping because sure you can get a
Yeah.
fighter, but I could be very wrong
Yeah,
about
I
that.
guess
We'll
we'll
see.
find out, right? I think the thing I'm worried about, and I haven't play tested enough, and maybe we don't go down this tangent too much, but just the idea is that like if I'm trying to hold objectives and all somebody has to do is play power cards to get me off of them because they killed my fighter off of them, it
Hmm.
feels pretty bad.
Yeah,
Um, and there's that whatever it's called, the score 2 for killing someone with a surge.
sudden
Sudden
demise.
demise. I
Yeah,
like it. I like the card a lot, but I think it's pretty spicy when you have 2 wound fighters that you can start
yeah.
kicking off.
I think it might be headed for a restriction, in my
Yes,
opinion.
I think that is.
I mean, I remember when that came out and we were talking to each other, like,
Yeah.
I think this unlocks a whole new deck type. Like I
Yes.
think this on its own makes ping decks, and then of course there's just a flood of ping cards
Yeah, there's
to come
just
with
so
it.
many
So
that they've added to the game. So
yeah,
very interesting stuff. Yeah, we'll definitely have some interesting conversations in the future about all the ping.
sure. Hey, let's do a little bit of quick community shout outs.
Sure.
There's one that I wanted to hit. We've got another listener starting up a blog. There's just the one post so far. Um, I think on his blog he's going by R77.
Hmm.
He's Ramosite77 on our Discord, and starting up some of his blog. It's from the perspective of playing Gnarl Spirit Pack in the Nemesis format, specifically this one using Daring Delvers, which is
Yeah.
yeah, that's a rogue choice. But he's done a really good job of breaking it all down. He's got card images there, so you don't have to be someone who's memorized everything. So all the references are there, and he's very nicely laid out. And I hope he does some more, or they do some more. I will make sure that we've got a link to that in the show notes, so you can go check it out if you've not already. And that
Yeah.
reminds me, we got to update our list of links. So
Yeah.
we'll get to that too.
Absolutely.
Um, anything you got, Phil?
Uh, Nobody else's community stuff, but our own community stuff. If you're looking for a tournament to come and play at, we are going to be doing one for the first quarter of next year, January 21st at Noble
Yeah.
Night Games in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. So, coming out, jam some games, have some fun. We've got the new prize kit, and it should be a good time.
Yeah, we'd still love to get new players. This will be championship format this time around,
Yep.
and so a little higher curve on there. But if you are in the area, come on and play. So,
Even if you're not in the area.
yeah,
It's maybe a bit of a stretch, but hey, if you feel like traveling, by all means.
yeah, we'll make sure to make it a hospitable time for you.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd say we stop pitter pattering around those center hexes and get into it here.
Sure thing.
Phil, we kind of got two things to cover here. We have the Looncourt and we have the Fearsome Fortress Rivals deck. We're going to do a deeper dive on each of these. You're kind of getting first impressions. Again, thanks to GW, we've had the chance to play with both of these. So they're some informed takes. So not exactly hot takes, but let's say room temperature takes. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Co-
Lukewarm.
yeah, cozy blanket during the winter takes.
Yeah.
That kind of not so hot. It's gonna burn you, but it'll be comforting. Do you want to touch on Looncourt first, or you want to hit Fearsome Fortress?
Let's talk about this Looncourt Warband. I think people will
Okay,
be curious about these guys. So let's just
I
lead off there.
I agree. We'll kind of do a deeper dive, like maybe. I mean, we rarely do the card by card thing here, but we're gonna do. Let's do the overview here. Kind of central to these guys is the quest mechanic. So I think that's almost. I think that might be the best place to start. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
It's not a plot, even though you maybe could have guessed that it should have been. But it plays a lot like a plot. So essentially, this warband has a handful. I think is it 7?
Yeah, I think I counted up 7 of them. Yeah.
Yes, 7 quest objectives. So these are a combination of both end phase and surges, so there's nothing to stop them from being one or the other. And the way that these work is that when you want to score it during a power step, you can choose to give the quest like an upgrade to a friendly fighter who has no tokens, none at all.
Mm.
Uh,
And
and
Phil, when we
then,
say tokens, like what are we? Because people can
yeah,
get
so
counters and tokens confused when
counters
we
and
talk about
tokens, yeah,
tokens.
yeah, yeah. So like a move token, a
Mm-hmm.
charge token,
Mm-hmm.
stagger token, guard
Yep.
token.
Yep.
Uh, in the rule book, they should be defined, but I think that's all of them. And so if you've basically done anything with the fighter, you probably, unless it was just an attack, you probably can't play a quest. So you're sort of having to like double uh, give away what you're trying to do because you both have to set it out like in the power step ahead of what you want to do, and then it has to be done with that specific fighter. Um, and then, of course, you still have to meet the conditions. So, kind of different.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you've played this thing out. You do not draw another card to replace it in your hand, so your hand will only have however many you have left.
Mm.
But the quests will then stay on the fighter until either they're taken out of action or they score it.
Sure.
And if you do have the fighter get taken out of action, the card does say that you then put it back in your hand, even if you have 3 or more objective cards. Um, so, like, you don't just lose them if you fail to score them with your fighter, but like they do have a delay before you would get another shot at them.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing exactly how these operate sometimes. So
Yeah.
at times you had a surge quest in your on your fighter card.
Yep.
If you score a surge quest, it's unclear. Do you then draw a replacement? Uh, if you
Yeah.
do, then what if you already had 3? How are you getting to 3 in your hand anyway? Is that if a quest is out at the end of the round, then do you still get to draw up to 3 in your hand? Uh, I
Yeah.
I
There's some.
think there's some you can kind of go on instinct and figure out how some of this stuff, but there's some that's not immediately apparent. And again, they kind of lay out the whole quest mechanic each time they write it all out on each card. So every
Yeah.
one of these quests looks like a huge wall of text because it
Yeah.
is in the same way that illusions were. But it feels like it could have benefited from a plot card to just kind of lay it out for us.
Yeah. And it would just save a lot of printing, right? I mean, there'd just be so much less text on each card if they had done that. But
Yeah.
um, it's fine.
Yeah.
It
If
works.
you think of it as, hey, you are going to play with some of your objective hand in the open,
Yep.
that's probably the easiest way to think
I,
about
I
it.
think I think so. And yeah, so I mean, there's some needed checks of the rule book to see if there's anything that would really clear up how the drawing will work with these. But that's sort of the only thing that we had questions about when we played with this.
Hey, everybody, Davey here with a quick editor's update. The relevant page for what you want, if you're trying to figure out how these quests work, is page 44 of the Gnarlwood rulebook. It has the end phase laid out for you. Basically, it works how you think it would. You have, once the quests are played out, you just follow the rules as they're written. It's pretty simple. If you have a quest that is a surge, the rules instruct you after you score it to draw a new one. So let's say you had 1 surge quest out and 2 cards in your hand. Score the surge that's a quest, draw a new one into your hand. If somehow at the end of the phase you have 3 quests played out, don't score any of them. You have no cards in your objective hand. In the end phase, you're going to drop to 3, so you're going to have 3 quests out and 3 cards in your hand. You could then lose all 3 of those fighters, have to pick them up, and then have 6 cards in your hand. I think the easiest thing to remember is that the only specific reference to having 3 cards in your hand is at the end phase, when you've scored any objectives you wanted and discarded any that you don't want. It specifically says if you have less than 3, draw up to 3. There's no other specifically referenced limit to having only 3 in your hand, so that's the only time that hand size is checked. And I hope that makes it a little bit easier. Anyway, back to the show.
it's a very interesting mechanic. I think it's very unique. I doubt we'd ever see anything like this again. How do you feel about it?
Well, so on first glance, I was pretty anti. I was like, man, I really don't like having to signal so early what my objectives are. However, the deck itself has a number of cards that interact with quests, uh,
Does
and that becomes a way to make these a little more powerful. So, like, think of it, there's like a +1 defense until you score your quest or until the end of the round. That's a pretty great gambit if you can put that out early, and that's specifically what you can do with this. So,
yeah,
um, I think we'll, as we get into some of those cards, we'll get into it. But you found some interesting dynamics with that, like you were feeling when we were playing, because you play these guys. You've My impression from the other side was that it was putting some real tough choices in your hands of like, this would be really powerful to do. It also really kind of stinks to signal this early that here's what I want to do, and here's where I'm committing my resources already. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, you literally are showing your hand, right?
yeah,
Um, and it also, as you mentioned, some of the power cards do rely on quests, which then can put you in some weird spots where you know you want to play those power cards, but maybe you don't want to have to put the quest on a specific fighter that you want to play the ploy on. So then you're like, well, what's worth more? Suboptimally putting out the quest or not buffing my fighter? And I was struggling. I think there's going to be a high skill cap with these guys. We were just playing rivals, and I was just really struggling with the decision points. I feel like it slowed our games down a lot.
mm,
Trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it.
yeah. So, and the other thing to know about these quests is it's the primary way that most of these guys inspire, or it's
True.
the
Yep.
everybody except the boss inspire by scoring a quest that is attached to them.
Yes.
Um, I it is also the interesting thing where, like you said, if that fighter dies, then that quest can come back into your hand, and so there's one that's for successfully landing a charge. Well, if you want to put it on somebody like that, that's tough because normally you'd only have one chance per round to score something like that. But if you kind of put it on a Hail Mary throwaway, like you could try a strategy of like, I'm going to put it on one of um, the schlubs, charge
Yeah.
them. If they miss, well, now that the other player's got to decide, well, do I pick off this Dangle Bro, get the glory for it, but then put that quest back in the gets player's hand, or is that now a deterrent? So there's also this whole other step of like, oh, is there a deterrent game around this now?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
for sure. Because I mean, if you leave the fighter who charged alone, that's
yeah,
just one objective that's just dead for the rest of the round, guaranteed. And
hmm
I mean, surges that are dead hurt really bad. So,
yeah. But on the
um,
on the flip side, if a Dango Bro can be like, all right, I get to be
yeah,
left alone,
guess I'm just safe. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, like I said, I think very high skill ceiling. I think there's going to have to be a lot of testing with these guys to figure out how best they work.
hmm
Um, but on the face of it, in Rivals anyway, quests felt pretty tough to play with for
mm
sure. I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess to borrow from Battle Mallet a little bit. How do you feel like these guys are for somebody who's like just getting into the game who like loves goblins?
Uh, that's a good question. Certainly, I was about to try to decide if they're easier to get or harder to get. I mean, easier to. I was about to try to opine on whether they are easier to play or harder to play than Zarbags gets. Whether or not one of the or the other is harder, these are certainly easier to get. So,
They
uh,
certainly are easier
yeah,
to get. I
yeah.
think, man, I
I
feel like somebody coming in brand new to the game would struggle with these guys, but that's
maybe so, but if you think of Zarbags with the Scurry and with Snirk and some of the timing
yeah.
windows that,
Zarbags,
uh,
I think were
yeah,
pretty tough to play too. Maybe
yeah,
they're both just equally bad for new players.
yeah. um, yeah, I think, well, I think more so than anything, I think often new players might just look at that quest mechanic and be like, I'm pretty sure it works like this. And it's players who know a little bit more of the ins and outs might be like, well, actually, I'm not really sure how,
Yeah,
like we're
I
seeing some of it
suppose.
possibly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if we were to summarize the fighters, you've got two Dangle Bros that would be Nags and
Burke.
Burke, Pointy Burke, who might be my favorite. Uh, Na-
Yeah.
Nags and Burke are just kind of little two wound. I like that they have slightly different profiles. Nags is a little more accurate when inspired. Burke does a little more damage when inspired.
Yep.
Uh, there is Pokin Snark, who it's actually pretty handy. He's got one extra wound, so he's a 3 wound fighter. He's
Yep.
got a squig on a stick. He actually starts at 2 damage, which was a little bit of a surprise to me when you laid some damage in. And then he's got Nashin, which another fighter has, which is a crit effect that breaks an upgrade, which I don't think came into play in any of our
No.
games, but it has the potential for those big swings, big rounds.
Yes, definitely.
I will hit Snorbo de Spore and leave you the last 3.
Sure.
Snorbo de Spore is kind of amazing. He's got a weird mushroom trumpet
Yep.
that also like shoots. So who knows what's going on with this mushroom that he's blowing on? But it's a decent range weapon right out of the gate. Range 3 fury, 1 damage, stagger on a not on a crit, but just on a successful hit, and then that inspires up to also have cleave. So very minimal gain on inspire,
Yes.
but that's kind of a nice early play, and there's some things that he may be able to score, or he can try and set the board up for later, because there's some guys that you really want to land a hit with.
Yes. And I will say he is your most accurate fighter to start with. So
Oof.
it's something to lead with, I guess.
Yeah.
Get
Lead
the
with that
stagger out
highly
there.
accurate 3 fury. Yeah.
Yeah, do the 3 fury, get a stagger token, hopefully let your other guys get some rerolls. But the remaining 3, so we've got I mean, I guess there's sort of 4. Golko and Pronk. So these guys are pretty silly. One of them's holding a door. The other one is sitting on top of his shoulders. I don't actually know which one's which.
That's a good point.
And they've got like a makeshift slingshot set up on top of the door with a squig that they're trying to shoot off of it.
Yeah.
So they're interesting. They're slower, so they're only 2 speed instead of 3. But they do have 3 wounds still, so they're not as likely to get one shot. And they have a 3 range shot that they can do once per turn, which, if they haven't moved or charged, goes up to range 4, which was actually pretty useful.
Yeah.
I actually thought that they wouldn't care so much about the range 4, but being able to just place them not even like super aggressively at the beginning of the game and just being able to lob shots at people's starting hexes felt pretty good.
Yeah, it's also that Gristlewell effect, where a 2 fury attack, you're like, it's not that accurate. But when it's doing 2 damage, or in the case of Gristlewell 3, you're like, well, actually, that is a real big problem for me if that manages to land.
It's actually something.
And that goes up to almost effectively 3 fury once, if you can get Snorbo to land a mushroom blast.
Yeah, or if you get somebody else to provide some support or something.
Yeah.
And he's the other fighter with Nashin, so I guess that you can kind of keep track that the guys who have the small squigs, they can break upgrades.
Yep.
So then we have our other squig knight. So this is Grib. He is probably the most important fighter in the warband. He's riding on a squig. He's got a weird like pole hammer lance.
So the background on is it's like this busted up lance that he just kind of crammed a mallet head on the top of, and it's he was trying to be knightly and have like a lance, but he figured out it was extraordinarily hard to hit anything from the back of a bouncing squig.
Yep.
So now it's his wonky lance, and so it's easier to just bash something from the back. So
yeah.
he's got a hammer lance, the classic hammer lance.
The classic. Everyone's image when they imagine the stately knight.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so he's actually fast. He's speed 4,
Hmm.
3 wounds, so he's also not likely to just get taken right out. And he has 2 weapon choices. He can just swing his lance and do, it's a range 2, 2 fury, 2 damage, which
Hmm.
isn't amazing, but you know, it's something. And then if he charges, you can use it anytime you want, but I think you pretty much only do it on a charge. You can have the squig just ram stuff with its horn. So it's normally a 2 smash 2 damage attack, but if he's charging, it's 3 damage. So
Hmm.
he's pretty scary right out the gate because he can just get out and get somebody. So my impressions from playing with him is that he is your workhorse. He is the one who is sort of driving a lot of the lethal ability of the warband, at least in rivals. So you really don't want him to go down.
Yeah. I mean, it's that super super difficult road to walk where this is a fighter that you need to have do work, but also a fighter that you can't really afford to lose until you've really made some progress
Yeah,
and given yourself the chance to maybe get some of your other fighters up and running. Um,
yeah,
and you can also end up in this situation where, like, well, this is my guy that's got range 2, so he's the one that's most likely to attack multiple times. So actually, he's going to get most of my upgrades. So you're dumping more and more upgrades on this guy who's still only got 3 wounds. So
yeah.
uh,
Doesn't
better,
feel great.
yeah. If you go all in on Grib, and then Grib bites it, you are left with kind of ashes for the rest of your warband. But
Yeah,
Grib can do some work. Grib did some work.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think especially in rivals, you pretty much have to use him that way. Like,
Hmm.
I don't think you have enough stuff really with the rest of the warband.
Right.
But I mean, he looks super cool. His
He
model's
does.
awesome.
Yeah.
So that's something. His inspired side flavor text I like says Grib cuts the most knightly figure of the Loon Knights. Though that's not saying much.
Excellent. Yeah, they actually made a fair amount of room for flavor text on these
All these
guys. Even
fighter cards, yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty great. A lot of them are it's pretty good flavor text too. So
that just leaves Grinkrak,
it
right?
does. So Grinkrak is actually, for as leaders go, pretty okay.
Pretty okay.
Pretty okay. I mean,
The
he's
the
only got
Looncourt story.
3 move, 3 wounds. So you're like, okay, that's not great, but he does start on double block,
Yeah.
so he's not easy to hit, and he's got a pretty average attack with his stick that is a range 1, 2 smash, 2 damage. So very average attack profile, but he's more defensive than most. So I'd say that's it's pretty okay. The really nice thing about Grinkrak is he is a lot like Thundrick in that he has a reaction that he can use after you score an objective, and specifically for this warband, it has to be a non-quest objective,
Hmm.
and you can then choose one surviving friendly fighter and inspire them.
Yeah.
I think that is going to be critical to playing this warband in non-rivals.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of opportunity in rivals to not score with quests, so
Right. There's
and
only 5 objectives left in your deck that are not quests.
they're, I believe, all and oh no, well,
There's one
3
where
end
he's got to
phase
kill somebody, and
and
yeah.
the surges are not super simple. So
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it basically gives you the opportunity. Like, if you just chose to build a deck that didn't include any quests, then he is just then your whole warband is just inspiring as if you were Thundrick's Profiteers,
yeah,
right?
which
Uh,
actually
Go ahead.
feels pretty good, but
It does, yeah. You can put some pretty reliable surges in there. I think that may be the way a lot of championship players uh, go. I think it's maybe less of a headache if you're looking for more reliability and
yeah,
such. But
yeah, for sure.
and I just want to give a kind of shout out to the Gnarl Spirit season of rules here, where reactions are no longer blocked by enemy reactions, and so they were able to write this ability as a reaction instead of it being
Yeah, I
instead
don't.
of it being like the Blade Coven, where it's just like this thing happens. It's not really a reaction;
Yeah,
it just
there's
happens, and then it's always like, well, when does it happen? Or
yeah.
they had to write it like that before because it could be blocked, and
Yep. Yep.
This now they don't have to worry about it. You could block it yourself if you had a really weird timing window thing that popped up, but that's on you. So
True.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I don't think there's any window that you could possibly find for that, but yes,
no,
you could
yeah,
theoretically block yourself.
yeah,
I guess it is, as you said, all of them inspire after scoring a quest, except so Grinkrak has the exception. If you have three or more other friendly fighters that are inspired, Grinkrak will also inspire.
yeah.
Um, so if you're really going off on your quests, you could just get Grinkrak to go without dub, but feels unlikely. At
Yeah,
least,
and he doesn't really need it. He goes from 2 smash 2 damage to 3 smash 2 damage, and that is
yeah,
the only change.
yeah,
Uh, we do note that although a couple of these fighters don't get much from inspiration, there are some objectives that care about whether you're inspired or not, and um,
yes. So
that makes adds a little bit of pressure to inspire or not. I think how you use this guy. Obviously, we were playing in the rivals format for ours. I think how you use this guy though depends a lot on whether you are, like if you're playing in rivals, you can actually I think be a little more aggressive with him because your other guys will inspire off of quests, and so
true.
you may be able to push this guy forward and say, "Hey, yeah, I got 2 block. If you want to try and take some swings on this fella, then good luck to you."
Yeah,
If he's your only route to inspiration because you built championship and abandoned quests, well then that's a different story altogether.
yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's actually a fair point. I kind of needed him to do work in our game at the end, and he was sort of out of position to do so. Um, and I probably could have just had him further forward. So it's a good observation and a good lesson learned.
Sure. Uh, I think the only other one thing I wanted to say about these guys as a whole is since we didn't break down every profile, all of them but 2 end up with 2 defense dice once inspired, and
Yeah,
they all start on 1 or more block. I mean, 1 block with everybody except for the leader who starts on 2.
yeah,
That's pretty good for a horde warband. Like
yeah. It's not bad.
I, I'm used to the days where if you're a horde, you're starting on 1 dodge by and large, with just a few exceptions. So, um,
Yeah,
not
and
nothing, and that's important when most hits will kill you.
very. Um, and it's flavorful, right? I mean, these guys are all dressed up in armor, so like
Yeah,
they kept it, you know, within the style. They're like,
yeah,
yeah, these guys have heavy armor on, so they're gonna have block. They're gonna be like the Stormcast,
yeah.
um, which I appreciate.
If you could summarize, we're going to get into their cards, but before we do, if you could summarize how you think the general play style of these guys are, if you're getting pointed in a particular direction with them or 1 or more directions, what do you think that would be?
Uh, in Rivals or just in general?
Let's say in rivals, and then you could back off into general if you want.
Okay, so I think in Rivals they are definitely being pushed forward. So they feel very much like a. I would they're probably not full aggro. They're probably more of like a hold flex in enemy territory kind of thing, where you're trying to be aggro, but they have some rewards for standing on objectives and but like by and large they need to be in enemy territory. They have multiple end phases that score off of being in enemy territory, so um, they are aggressive for sure.
Mm. Yep. Aggressive. Yeah, I think flex is a good way to say it. Like mostly aggressive, a little bit of flex in there. They have some situations where they care about particular objectives and that sort of thing, as in
Yeah.
objective tokens. Um, yeah, I think that's fair. I think if you look at their power deck too, it all kind of feeds into that by and large. There's not a lot of stuff that will trigger for them unless they're in combat.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
all right, well, let's get into it. I think what we'd like to do is each highlight a couple of cards that we think are particularly important in understanding this warband, or that made for a particularly inventive design.
Yeah.
And so we're going to each highlight a couple from each category. Phil, do you want to start with 1 or 2 of your, I don't want to say favorite objectives, but 1 or 2 objectives that you think are worth talking about?
One that I find to be very interesting, didn't actually get to end up playing with it at all, is one of their end phase cards called Small Glories.
Mm.
So this is a end phase score where if you have each surviving friendly fighter inspired and or have one or more upgrades, you score 2.
Mm.
Um, Not easy to do round one. I mean, you're definitely not
Theoretically, just
probably,
about impossible. I
yeah,
mean,
almost impossible. I
yeah,
mean, you'd have to have some sort of crazy start. But feels like in rounds 2 and 3, it starts to become fairly reliable, if not almost automatic.
yeah,
So a 2 glory end phase that can almost always score if you don't have it in your first hand feels pretty good.
yeah. Especially in the age of the more forgiving mulligan, I
Yeah.
think round 2 it scores easily as long as you're willing to maybe spread an upgrade where you're not totally excited about having it,
Yeah.
and then round 3 it gets even more into the like maybe we'll just score.
Yeah.
Uh, I like Mob'em. This is a
Yeah.
quest. It's a surge, so it has all the information about how what to do with this quest. And it says score immediately after a supported friendly fighter's successful attack action if the fighter made that attack action or supported that fighter. So if you were supported or were supporting, there's a way to score this, which is pretty cool. The second half is a little trickier because you might say, okay, I'll charge in with somebody, get them in a good position, and then I'll throw this on. Well, you can't because
Yeah.
if they have a token, you're out of luck. But what this does, as opposed to the objective that needs you to charge, you can, if you have a support setup. I think as things get a little more scrummy in the later rounds, and they can leverage some pretty decent pushes. Um, there's ways to land this,
Yep.
and it's just a successful attack action, which is always easier than scoring a kill.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like this one too.
Yeah,
I know that there's a generic version basically of this in Destruction. So you can kind of lean into that support scoring stuff.
yeah.
Um,
I think the difference on this is that support ed or
yeah, yeah,
supporting
yeah.
either
Right.
either way, and
You don't,
that's a lot more flexibility. And
yeah,
this is actually pretty scoreable by your ranged fighters too.
it is. It is.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice. I guess in playing with it though, I wound up in a lot of situations where I couldn't keep a fighter next to one of your fighters to set up the attack,
Hmm.
and I didn't have a push in the rivals deck that let me set it up until like very late in the game. But they
Got it.
do have pushes in the deck. I just wasn't drawing them. I think that was the
Sure.
main problem.
What's another objective that you like?
Um, there are number of them that I like, but I think I want to talk about one that's maybe just more interesting. Is Looncourt Infestation. So this is a surge, is not a quest. Um, if you have more friendly fighters in another player's territory than that player's fighters, so basically it's just lengthening shadows, but it also has a caveat of being able to score this if you hold objectives 1, 2, and 3.
Hmm.
This scores for 2 as a surge.
Yeah,
Um,
Surge of Two, pretty
Surge of
great.
2 is pretty nice. And if you have a way to set up the hold, like that's not bad at all. A hold 3 surge for 2 is good
Yeah.
for anybody who didn't play during Beastgrave. Now, of course, it's a little trickier because it is specifically objectives 1, 2, and 3, but um, having that second condition makes this quite a bit more reliable. And there'll be times, since this is a surge, where you're playing against an elite warband and you can just use a push to push a bunch of your fighters into enemy territory and just score this.
Yeah. Yep. And this is not their only 2 glory surge. They have another one for
Thank
killing
you.
somebody with more wounds than they have. Pick on to get your own size, which you pulled off on one of my fighters and landed yourself a 3 glory kill
Yeah,
and inspired the fighter I was on. I was like, oh no,
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
this is feeling rough.
I do like that one as well. That's
Uh,
another good one.
yeah, right. I wanted to highlight. I talked a little bit about the head games that putting these quests out will do, and I think a great example of that is na 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 na.
I
If I'm
think
trying to say
you're
it like
trying
a
to onomatopoeia na 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 na.
na 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 na. Yeah, that's what's going on there. This is a surge and a quest, so it goes on somebody It'll surge if after an enemy fighter attack action that targets this fighter and fails.
Yeah,
Uh,
I like it.
these are normally amazing. This is signaled, so it's much weirder.
Yeah,
Um, but we talked about like throwing this on a dangle bro out, and specifically because you can pick this back up into your hand. I think this is one you put on people who are like, it's kind of a 50-50 if they're going to live, right? Like
yeah,
the temptation is to put it on somebody who, oh, I want this on somebody who's got great defensive stats. That means that they're
yeah,
really likely to miss if they attack, and somebody's just going to be like, well, I'm not going to attack. So you can use this as extra safety insurance, or you can put it in as like, hey, in the vein of oh, well, it's not really like these cards that give you glory for losing somebody, but you can put it out and say, all right, if you miss, I'm getting glory. If you hit, I'm going to put it back in my hand, and somebody else is getting it, and I'll try again on it. Like this,
yeah,
this feels like one of the more repeatable ones.
yeah. And I think I like your point that it's sort of the head games. Like, so if I didn't actually get to play with it, but if I was going to use this, I think most often I would probably put it on when I was ready to charge with Grib.
Mm,
And so then it's like, well, he's now in your lines. He's done his charge. He's done for the turn. Do you want to take him out before next round because he's scary? Or do you ignore him because you don't want me to score nah, 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 nah?
yeah,
And
yeah,
he, hopefully was able to inspire, so he's on 2 dodge. And then it's like,
mm,
oh, catch 22. Do you leave the really scary fighter alone, or do you risk missing him and then scoring me a surge?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a design that kind of takes a look at the quest mechanic and finds a new spin on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's pretty fun.
Absolutely.
Any other objectives you wanted to hit, or should we move on to gambits?
I think. I mean, we could talk about more, but let's just move on. We've got for folks who don't know, we are gonna do full rundowns of all the different cards in our blog post.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want a breakdown of every single one of these cards, you can go find that over there. We'll have it posted probably in the show notes and up on our website.
Yeah.
So I think those are sort of the most interesting ones to me. So I think unless you got anything else, we could probably jump over to some surges or not
Yeah.
surges, ploys.
Yeah, let's check out these gambits. Give me a gambit that you think is worth highlighting.
Yeah. So I think my favorite one. Well, it's kind of hard to choose. So there's 2 push gambits that I really like. Shockingly, we like push gambits.
Yeah.
Um,
What?
I think the one I like more, although it's going to be situationally less useful, is Sound the Charge.
Hmm.
So this one is restricted to Snorbo, which is somewhat unfortunate, but it lets you push each friendly fighter in your territory 1 hex towards the nearest enemy fighter. So theoretically, you can push 7 fighters, which is pretty good. But even if you can only push, a handful late in the game, that's still solid. Now, of course, you might not be in your territory anymore, which could make this worse. But I think
Yeah.
you'll know if you need to fish for this. I think maybe if you get longboarded, you probably try and mulligan into it just to
Mm-hmm.
have that extra speed in early
Mm-hmm.
turns.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said it that you have some speed problems, and because you're filling every starting hex, you have some slow people that are way at the back.
Yeah,
And if you want to be able to get some of those other numbers relevant, this is an important card.
very.
Um,
How about you? What's one that you're looking at and thinking that's pretty
uh, it would be I let's talk a pair. There's Giddish Ferocity, and this is
oh,
plus
sure.
1 dice to range 1 and 2 as long as you have a quest attached,
Yep.
or until the end of the phase. And there's Giddish Resilience. Actually, I guess it's a
There's 3.
triple. There's
Yeah.
Celerity, Ferocity, and Resilience. Celerity gives plus 2 move as long as you have a quest. Ferocity is plus 1 dice as long as you have a quest, and Resilience is plus 1 defense as long as you have a quest. Those are things that make it not feel as bad to have a quest on. Although, like you said, you all of a sudden the gambits are driving the quests, because you're like, man, I really want to get this defense on. I guess I'm gonna give this guy a
Guess I'm
quest.
going quest.
Yeah. All right. But I mean, it did the trick. I think
Yeah,
you
it
came
worked
in
really well.
with Grib came bounding in on 2 block. I was like, oh, that doesn't feel good this early in the game. I can't really easily get through that. And then Grib inspired, scored a quest, so he lost this, but then Grib was on 2 dodge. I was like, oh no, it didn't. It only get marginally better. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
half
so
point
it,
decrease.
yeah, yeah, lets you get some riskier plays in.
Yeah,
So that's a trio that, especially in rivals where you're certainly going to be using the quest mechanic, and perhaps in some of the championship builds, that's an important set of cards that kind of leads into the whole design of this warband.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
and I think
Uh,
it's
Go ahead.
important to point out with Giddish Ferocity, it does apply to range 1 and 2 attack actions,
Yeah.
which, well, you only have one fighter with a range 2 attack action. He's the most important one. So
Mm,
if you can set this up right, you might be able to have Grib suddenly swinging much more accurately for an entire round with that
yeah.
lance.
Yeah. Definitely. I kind of cheated and took 3. So why don't
Yeah.
you take another?
um, well, I won't mention the other push just because it's very similar in its utility to the other one. Um, I think the only other one that I find really interesting is kind of two, so I'll cheat it too. Um, they've got this pair of pings,
Mm,
and they're kind of similar, although one's more random, one's harder to set up. So
yeah.
so basically, you've got one ping where you scatter from a fighter and deal 1 damage to a fighter in the chain. It's
Yeah.
scatter 2, so you got a pretty decent shot of being able to hit somebody adjacent to you. So I think you
Hmm.
use this kind of like pit trap or um, something like that from back in the day, where you hit them and they need 1 more damage, and then you
Mm,
pocket squig and
yeah.
throw a squig in their face.
I think championship you're taking just about any other
Yeah,
ping, but
you're right.
um,
Um, I think both of these probably don't cut it in championship, but they feel pretty decent, I think, in either Nemesis or Rivals, because pings are just pretty solid. The other one then is stick the boot in. You
mm,
need to have, so it's a reaction after a friendly fighter's activation if they're adjacent to a vulnerable enemy fighter. So you can really only do this to kill somebody off. Um, and that fighter is also adjacent to one or more of your friendly fighters. So you have to have 2 fighters adjacent to the same fighter to use this reaction, and that enemy fighter has to be vulnerable. Not great,
no,
but sometimes +1 damage that is a surprise can be a big deal. So,
yeah, yeah,
um, interesting. Uh, I mean, I guess probably better that Gambit or that pings have more of these restrictions than less, but
yeah,
uh, these ones are pretty hard to play.
yeah, yeah. When you put them against Dark Command and what the root trap one is, those are ones that
Yeah,
trigger extremely easily and very broadly.
yeah,
These ones not so much.
very much.
Last gambit I want to mention, only because it is very good, is stab, stab, and stab again. And this is
Sure. Yeah.
the classic. After a failed attack, you react to attack again.
Yep.
Very powerful. Um, you just need to remember that this re-attack is not a charge.
Correct. It
So
is
if
not.
you are charging with the squig horns, you don't have the plus. If you miss on the charge, using this means that your next attack will not have that +1 because it's no longer a charge attack. You won't be able to score that quest. But
Yep.
uh, just uh, just getting to attack again, getting an extra action out of a round is always high value.
Yeah. What's the timing on this? So, would you be able to score a kill surge if you hit with the stab stab reaction?
Yes, provided so if it's like you could get the pick on a get your own size.
Sure.
It's still an attack action. Unless the wording is really really specific, there's only a couple that I've seen that do that. Um,
Because I think some of them say like after your activation, like if you kill the fighter, like score this after your activation. But it would still be after the activation because the reaction
Yeah,
step happens before the ploy or before
e-
the gambit check. Jeez,
exactly.
words. Surge
Before
check.
the surge check.
All right. Yep. Well, we hit almost every single one of them, but yes,
Yeah.
they've got some interesting ploys.
Yep.
Like we've mentioned, tying three of them to the quests may or may not be a good thing, but it's certainly interesting and flavorful. I can
Yep.
appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Uh, what about upgrades? They've got a set of 10 here.
yeah, they sure do. Some of them are very basic. Some of them are much more interesting. Um, I think that there's just a couple that feel worth touching on to me, and I think I know one that you really like. So I will try and leave that one to you. Hopefully, I'm picking not the one that you wanted, but
Okay.
I will go with Despicable Cad. Um, so this is sort of interesting with some of the other support stuff. So this is an upgrade where your ranged one attack actions will have cleave, but then also fighters supported by this fighter will be considered to have an additional supporting fighter.
Yeah. That's a pretty good accuracy bump if you can get it
It is.
in position.
Yeah. And a nice thing with so it's a very minor accuracy boost to the fighter who gets it, but and then also has some ability to increase accuracy the rest of the warband, which I think is good just because cards that just make you count as an additional support sometimes can just kind of be dead, and cards that just give cleave usually don't do enough.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, let's stick them together, and then it's probably a pretty decent card.
Sure. I like cleave the more that we see fighters like Goral out there running around on
Yeah,
2 block.
3 block potentially
Yeah,
with
like
some
that.
very easy weighty blessings.
If you can at least reduce them to just fishing for crits, then at least that's a little bit
Yeah,
better.
much
So
much nicer.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
How about you? What do you got?
Well, I do like this downtrodden squire. Uh,
I thought that you might want this one.
yeah. So I don't think it's good. I think we have this phrase we like to use: "Is better, more cute than good."
Yep.
And I think it's exactly that. But still, this is a
Hmm.
reaction. After this fighter's move action, choose one friendly fighter that was adjacent to the fighter at the start of that action. Push that fighter by the shortest distance that is adjacent to this fighter. I mean, this card is pretty clearly made to be able to have somebody keep up with Grib. Um,
Yep.
and depending on if you can set your charge right, then you can make sure to bring somebody in for a support. Um, but this fighter is getting pushed, so even if it's just a matter of pulling somebody from further back, it means that you can have Grib further back alongside somebody else potentially. There's
Hmm.
just there's going to be some fun positioning tricks. Anyone who's played Cunning Crew knows that like having these extra pushes and moves can be pretty powerful. Again, I think it's a little too situational to actually be great. It does have the help from the Gnarl Spirit season, being that you can actually move multiple times. So if for some reason you're moving
Yeah.
Grib and not charging, you're just moving around, you can he,
Drag
he could
somewhere
it
around.
actually drag one goblin, then drag another goblin, and you could move 4 times and drag 4 goblins and not have made any attacks, and
Yeah, and
then
probably not advance down the board too much either, but
yeah, yeah,
maybe just ferrying them onto objectives. You just drop
yeah.
them off. It's
Use your
certainly
superior
interesting.
move. Yeah,
I think the only thing about this card that I like that tripped me up the first time I read it is just the end where it says by the shortest distance. So you must move the fewest number of hexes possible to get them adjacent, which oftentimes I think will mean that you are ending up with them sort of
behind you and not
behind
in a
the
supporting position.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah yeah, and that's not really what you want. And I'm not quite sure what the reasoning would be to do that. Like these guys feel like they were designed with the intent that yeah, you should have somebody come along to support him, but instead it's like nope.
Yeah.
Kind of drags them along. There are ways to get it to happen, but you have to do a lot more work. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
How about another one for you?
Sure. So I will say the rest of them are all well. That's not entirely true. There's like one more that's not just like a bonus to some stat, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, that's sort of what you want with upgrades, right? But there's not a lot to say about like +1 wounds or +1
Right.
damage. So this other one that I think is interesting is Cunning Advance. This is a leader restricted upgrade that gives Grinkrak an action that lets him push each inspired friendly fighter 2 hexes.
Mm.
Could be very good if you care more about getting into position than charging.
Yeah.
So another piece that sort of lends itself to that flex play, where maybe you're just trying to get onto objectives, or maybe just trying to push a bunch of fighters into enemy territory.
Right.
But
We've seen in other warbands where this action push 2 is pretty good. This one has the restriction of inspired, but crushes good crushes players would use that Morgok action to good effect.
Yeah, I mean, it was really good with them. The upside there being that you just had to have the resources on Morgok to do it, whereas here you have to inspire the other fighters first
and get this upgrade out.
Yeah, not like super hard to do, but it, you got a couple more hoops to jump through. I do think it's still probably good if you have the deck set up around it to play well.
Yeah.
But probably not something you need if you're just going straight aggro. So.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'd say is important from a rival's perspective is that they've got a couple ways to boost damage. There's Cunning Knight, which helps +1 damage while this fighter has one or more supporting fighters. So if you can set up a support, and that's got no range restriction. So Snorbo can all of a sudden have a 2 damage doot on his mushroom horn, which is kind of nice, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're picking up cleave or have already staggered somebody, you can just keep on hitting them once they're staggered and rip through.
Absolutely. Or go to a 3 damage Squig Chucka.
Sure. Right. Exactly.
Feels pretty good.
And then Pointy Boots is +1 damage for range 1. That's just going to be the difference. And those things are pretty scarce in rivals.
Absolutely.
So thumbs up to those. They have some pretty decent upgrades. Some stuff that you look at and say, well, in Championship, I would, there's a couple weapons in there. I would rotate those out for more powerful attack action upgrades, but it's important for them to have them in Rivals and Nemesis because if you have, some of your little guys who are not yet inspired, or even Skolko and Pronk who have their one attack action, they only have one attack action on their profile, and they can make that attack action once per round. So once they've done that, if they don't have another weapon in their hand, they can walk around. They can go on guard. But they're otherwise done. So you would think with their short move of 2 that wouldn't be important, but you definitely had them trying to shiv people with
some desperation plays.
I think that might happen
terrible,
more often.
Though.
I think. Yeah, no, pretty decent. So that is the overview of the deck. What was your take after having run these guys out? And to be clear, we ran Rivals Looncourt versus the Fearsome Fortress, and I tried that in a couple warbands. What we kind of gave a summary at the start. After we've talked about any other thoughts you want to share on these guys before we talk Fearsome?
I don't want to color people's opinions too much, so maybe I will let people decide for themselves. I'll say they felt a little rough to me. Like they did not. It wasn't smooth, and I think I need to think about it a little bit more. But I think the main thing was if you don't hit your attacks when you need to hit them, you get stuck with quests that you then can't score, which means you don't get glory to put out upgrades, and the whole deck kind of falls apart. Because
they feel like, certainly as the way it turned out with us, there was hey, there's a whole lot riding on this particular roll.
Yeah, because it's if I do hit, I score a quest, I get inspired, I get glory, I draw more cards. The train starts rolling, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sort of similar, I guess, in a way to Velmorn, right? Where it's if I can roll these crits, suddenly stuff starts happening, and then you don't roll crits, and you're well, I guess I'm just not doing a whole
I
lot.
guess stuff will not start happening.
So like I don't want to put out the idea that maybe they're not good or anything like that. I think there's certainly play to be had here. I think they're a very cool warband. Um, I think they require a skilled player and probably a lot of reps to figure out sort of your optimal plays. I
Yeah, I
feel
really
I
like that
make mistakes.
what you mentioned about their skill ceiling, like having a sense that, hey, there's more here once you get into them. Like
Yeah,
there's potential. So
yeah, and we know from seeing people play the other gits. I'm forgetting their
Zarbag's gets.
Zarbag. Um, we know from seeing people play them that they have a lot of play, even
Yeah,
though like a lot of their stuff doesn't on face value look super great. And a lot of people are playing them aggro right now in championship. They just throw on weapons on little guys, and it's like, all right, here we go.
yeah,
And it feels awful because you're like, I guess I could spend time killing this little duder who just missiled at me and is basically nothing now. But if I don't kill him, then he chops at me with that cursed boarding pike again.
yeah, yeah. They trade well.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I look forward to seeing people champion this warband. I think there's plenty there, and I am interested to see if there is like a championship level quest build, or if that's something that's going to fall by the wayside. And
Yeah.
But I think that whether or not that has play in championship, it will remain relevant in Nemesis and Rivals,
Yeah,
obviously.
absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, so in our games, we had another deck that was getting played.
We did. Fearsome Fortress just spoiled not too long ago and dropping into our lap after these guys did. So my original idea, I wanted us to play. I wanted us to do Looncourt versus Grimwatch to have like
Yep.
diluted knights versus diluted knights, and then a gets off. We're gonna have Looncourt versus Zarbags. But the arrival of Fearsome Fortress kind of made us like, well, we better try this thing out too.
Yeah. Uh, I,
Um, Go ahead.
I mean, I'll just say, I really like this deck. I think it's cool. I think
That's
there's,
exactly what I was going to ask. Like, what your, let me back it up a little bit. When you first saw it, when you first like flipped through the cards, what was your first impression? And then how do you feel like that has changed after seeing it?
my first impression was that this is probably going to be a bit touch and go because you have to put your fighters into very vulnerable positions.
Yeah,
I guess maybe to even back up further, this
sure.
deck is designed around being in no one's territory or one hex out from no one's territory.
Yeah, something that we
So
saw with the Gore Chosen, right? Like they
yeah,
have a number of
yeah.
things that care about that.
Um, and so my initial impression was like, well, some of this stuff is really good, but like you really have to put your fighters into bad spots because it your positioning is absolutely dictated to you by the deck.
Yeah,
You will be in those spots the vast majority of the time.
yeah,
So I thought certain warbands can definitely take advantage of that, but it's going to be sort of this touch and go thing.
yeah.
The way it ended up playing out, better than I had actually expected.
You
Um,
and me both.
yeah, it played quite well, and maybe some of that is because I couldn't pressure enough. But
Mm,
I feel like Grib was putting out some pain, and you were
yeah,
still scoring. So yeah, played well. It's cohesive. Like has a theme that it wants to do. There's like nothing in here that's like, why is this here? Like it doesn't
right,
fit.
right.
Like everything makes sense. So uh, pretty cool. I think similar to quests, we have a plot for Fearsome Fortress. How about we start there?
Yeah.
Seems like the
Well, that's a great discussion point. Is that this is there was some theorizing by folks that there might not be a plot card associated with this rivals deck. There is, so that means if you're including cards from this, you're not mixing it with not deadly depths, daring delvers, or tooth and claw,
mm-hmm.
which that'll be a discussion for a later point. Like if that's the way we're headed.
Yeah. That's, put another topic down for the debate episodes.
Exactly. This plot card is extremely simple. You all you do is after the place feature token step, a player with this plot card places one available feature token. So that's going to be your currently it's the snare or cover. You pick which side. It's got to go within 1 hex of no one's territory. It could go directly in no one's territory or not, but it can't be in a starter, blocked, a lethal, or a cover hex. And once you do, you get to decide which is face up. If both people happen to have it, then players roll off, and the winner places one first, and then so on. Two thoughts about this. One, if you are playing Fearsome Fortress and your opponent is playing Daring Delvers, you have, well, I was going to say you've already limited Daring Delvers opportunities because there's fewer available feature tokens. And some of what I've done with Daring Delvers before is, use that to kind of set up landing spots for yourself in enemy territory. On the flip, if you happen to put this, if you have to be careful about where you put this, because if you put this in no one's territory, or if you put it like 1 hex away from no one's in your own, all of a sudden Daring Delvers really cares about that. Like they will fight you over this hardcore. And so that makes for an interesting. I think that'll be an interesting matchup to see, is the Daring Delvers versus Fearsome Fortress.
Yeah. I think that that matchup, I mean, basically making the two warbands do similar but not exactly the same things, and have them fighting over the same resources, is going to make for some really interesting gameplay.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the other stuff that's going on right now is like aggro in enemy territory. And if both sides are doing that, they want to like run past each other and just charge. And it's like, well, that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with aggro, but if everybody's just doing that, it just, I don't know, it just ends up being a big slugfest.
That's pretty clever, because they figured out like, hey, let's build a deck that wants to hold stuff, but let's try not to build a deck that is, let's be way in the back and hold stuff, because we've seen that, and that some people are fine playing against that. Some people, it's a pretty bitter taste in their mouth. From doing that. So
I think it needs, like, there's a certain amount of that must be in the game for there to be enough balance, I think. Because if everything is just like aggro punchy, it feels like, well, why do we even have cards? It's just going to come down to who punches each other first.
Right.
But I think this helps bridge that gap in the current meta, and definitely should add some interesting options, especially in Nemesis. This feels really fun for Nemesis.
Yeah, it is a cohesive Rivals deck in the way that we hoped that they would be. Back in the days when we were looking at Illusory Might, or before that Silent Menace, we're like, oh man, like I like the idea of these, Silent Menace, this does not hold together. Illusory Might, they got closer, but it's still, there's still stuff that doesn't make sense, or stuff that is contradictory, or just too threadbare. But this holds together cohesively. One way, how a deck is not aggro, it does not have any damage buffs in it. Yikes.
It could be a little bit tricky. You do have a few other ways. It does have some ping stuff, right? Or am I wrong?
I don't. Let me take a look. It has a way to generate extra attacks. We'll get into that.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much
there is a ping. You're right.
But yeah, still, I mean, it's not aggro like at all. Which I mean, I think that's probably for the best, but it is certainly different. So
yeah,
I don't know.
When we were getting ready to play with this one, I was like thinking, I was at work yesterday, knew we were going to be playing this morning. It's like, all right, what do I need to bring? Like I want to bring something that that would work with this. I want to bring something where if you are playing Rivals, you might say like, hey, I'd be interested in trying a Universal Rivals. So I'm looking for somebody who maybe doesn't have a great Rivals deck on their own, or one that's fine, but might be willing to try some other things. And I want it to be something that people can get easily. So at first I was like, hey, maybe Steel Hearts. Like they might not hate doing something. Like, oh no, people can't get Steel Hearts. I thought a little bit about about the Shadeborn because they would appreciate an extra cover being placed. That's always nice. You can, when you place that extra feature token, you can put it cover side up. And there's one particular upgrade in here which makes a lot of feature tokens count whatever they're currently showing, and it makes them also count as cover, which is actually a really cool upgrade for them because all of a sudden they can be both in cover and holding an objective.
Yeah.
And that opens up opportunities for them as far as what, because they always used to have to in the delve days, like, okay, well, I want to delve everything to cover, but all of a sudden now I'm in trouble when it comes up for dominant position, and I'm just giving up on that.
Right.
So I thought about that, but then I decided I landed on the Harrow Deep. Actually, we tried with each of them. We tried the Cunning Crew, and we tried
Truth Seeker.
Xandar. We tried Xandar's Truth Seekers, and I, for different reasons, both those. For Xandar's, is like I kind of like Doraz being in here, and me with so little damage in this deck. It's nice to have somebody starting at 3 damage and being able to say, "Hey, look, like I can hit you back pretty hard, so don't get too saucy with me." And then Cunning Crew, I was a little worried because I've seen them at their most powerful when people are forced to come to them, and I was like, well, if they're running forward, that's a problem. But man, all that range 2, the 2 big guys with range 2 attacks, if you can get the little guys inspired on guard or in cover, like all of a sudden their defensive situation is better, and all the movement tricks means that you can find ways even after find unexpected ways to get onto or back onto the feature tokens after you have even deep into the round where the board state looks like it's really starting to firm up.
Yeah. And I'll say playing into them, it felt really bad once they were castled up, and it was like, all right, I got all 4 of my fighters in the, that middle strip where I want them to be. And I'm just ready to go to town with these range 2 attacks, and it's like, oh god, like I have to charge into this. Yuck.
Yeah, this big old support nest sounds terrible.
Right. So it felt really good actually, so maybe something for people to try out.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with that. You ready to talk cards though?
Yeah, let's talk some cards.
Okay. Just like any of the decks that they've been doing lately, there are 6 surges, so it is more functional out of the gate, and some are easier than others, but there's not too many that are just like, whoa, this is awful clunky. I'm not sure. There's one in there that I'm like, it's without in-faction support, I'm not 100% sure how this plays very easily, but yeah, what did you think was worth talking about in here?
So my favorite card in here, just period, is Conquered Domain. So this is a really spicy one. So you score this in an end phase if you have a friendly fighter on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory. So that's the first sentence. There's more, but we'll just start there. At base level, you can have 1 fighter on 1 feature token to score 1 glory. Not great, but like it's very reliable. You can kind of just do that.
Yeah.
The caveat is that you gain 1 additional glory point for each other friendly fighter on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory.
I will admit, until right before I was about to score this, I think I was 2 or 3 activations in. Actually, I might have surged into this now that I think about it, but looking at it, I was like, oh, wait, this is really good. Like, especially with the Cunning Crew, where I managed to do some I had more tricks than I needed. I had like some other tricks. It's like, well, I don't even need these other tricks. I can just use Manok's crazy cool stuff, shuffle around, and all of a sudden I'm sitting on 4 feature tokens. So I had a 4 glory end phase.
It was pretty nutty.
Off of 1 objective. Yeah.
So I like this one for its flexibility. I like this one for its power level. I like everything about this card.
Yeah, it's a good call. At its worst, it's fine. At its best, it's incredible.
Yeah. And there's uses for it in all, like, you would never feel bad about scoring this for its lowest point, and you would certainly never feel bad about it if it scores for 2 or more glory. So just very, very good card.
Yeah.
How about
Uh,
you?
yeah, man, there's a lot to go, a lot to like here. Earthworks is an interesting one that we haven't seen something like this in a while. This is score immediately after a friendly fighter is given a guard token if that fighter is on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory. Uh, there, even if you're just doing in our game, I drew it in the Xandire's game, and I was like, well, fine, I'll take an action and I'll give uh, Taros. I'll give
Taros.
Taros. I'll take an action with Taros to go on guard. Taros was then uh, on a feature on guard, and then as always supported um,
Yeah.
by your buddy.
Storm Rider. I don't know what
Storm
her
Rider,
name
yeah.
is, but
Terrace is then supported by Storm Rider, and so that's a pretty impressive defensive profile. And it was an action that was like, here, there's no way around it. I will get
yeah,
a glory from this and
just,
draw and see another card. Some warbands are going to do it even easier. If you think of Storm of Celestis, Sleek can do a warning cry and just get it on your opponent's turn, without even having to spend an action. Like, oh boy, wow,
I feel so bad.
So this is that sort of surge that makes you sit up and pay attention. You're like, I can get this. Now, you might say that in that case, I was able to do it a little at its least efficient. It's 2 activations to get you 1 glory because you got to move on and then go on guard.
Yeah.
At its most efficient, you're sleeking and you're not even using an activation, not even using a power card, and you're getting it. I was somewhere in between where I'd used a push reaction for Taros to get on there without having to move, and so it only cost me the 1 activation to get a 1 glory surge, which totally fine.
Yeah, but I mean, there's plenty of warbands that have easy ways to put out guard tokens.
Sure.
And there's some cards that are just like, hey, put a number of different fighters on guard, and it's like, well, that's nice. Like, I'll not only make my warband hard to hit, but I'll just score off of the power card I just played. Seems good.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I like it. I think it'll have good uses in a lot of different decks.
Yeah. What else do you got?
Yeah, so I'm focusing on a lot of these end phase stuff, but another one that I like is Stockpile. It's maybe not amazing, but I think it's reliable enough that it should be pretty playable for hold warbands.
Sure.
So this is one of the rare ones that doesn't care whether you're in the no one's territory sort of border. You just score this in an end phase if your warband holds objectives whose numbers add up to 6 or more. You score for 2. I think there's a lot of times you'll probably be able to score this from holding 2, and if you have to hold 3, it's suboptimal. But I think
if you have 3, you automatically, because the lowest ones you can have is 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
And then you'll get it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's your worst case scenario. If you have 4 or 5 in your territory, you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think that just feels good for hold warbands. It's not dominant position, but it's still pretty reliable, and your opponents might not see it coming if you're just holding 2.
Sure.
And
I
mean, what are they going to do about it either? Like,
sure.
I mean, you're a hold warband. Your thing is, I'm going to stand on objectives. So,
yeah, I just like caring about end phases. I just like caring about the numbers on the objectives. That's a fun thing that we don't always get to do.
And in a way that's not like you must specifically hold this one objective to score this, because sometimes it's just like stuck way in the back of your opponent's territory, and you're like, well, I guess my card's dead.
Yeah.
And so I like the design here. They're making numbers important, but they're not making it restrictive to the point where you can't score it, and it has a decent payoff. So a well-designed card, I think. Hopefully it's not stronger than I think it is. I hope it's not trivial.
One that I liked, and this is a good time to have a little bit of diversion, but I liked Siege Breakers. I think it's kind of tough, but so this is a 2 glory end phase. Score this in end phase if there are no enemy fighters in your territory. It's actually, in the current state of things, pretty difficult.
Yeah.
But in the case of playing it in Rivals, we talked back and forth about. I was, when we were deciding, well, if you're playing Fearsome Fortress, do you want to align boards to
Yeah.
maximize the number of hexes that are in no one's territory, or do you want to have more control over the feature tokens and be able to not get blocked out of putting them? And I think we both agreed that it seems safer to align the boards, and it may be hard to really disrupt that to a great degree. Um, and theorize that getting longboarded is really tough because then all of a sudden there's only 2 hexes that are in no one's territory,
Yeah.
and it really limits the spots that you want to fight for. What I found though is that with this, although I did not score it, it looked pretty good to me until your bounding squig bounced in. It's like I can't actually get him out. But if I'd found a way to stop him or knock him back out, then the rest of your warband just wasn't fast enough to do anything. And that gives me a like, hey, yeah, I got longboarded, but I've got this 2 glory that's, definitely scoreable, definitely doable.
Yeah.
So not too bad for that. You got to be real careful with the feature tokens because if you get longboarded, so I had advantage, so I placed my first feature token down. You placed in what seemed like a pretty good spot to block out, make it real hard for me to get another one that was anywhere close. But then what we noticed was like, oh, actually, I can now place in a way that guarantees that the last feature token placed can go on an edge hex, and I'm back to 2 placed and then 1 from the plot card. So there's back to 3 in a very small area, and then it's choke point city, man.
Yeah.
And that is actually decent for these guys to make sure that things are kind of clustered up and fighting over these things that they in the place and the spot where they want to be fighting anyway.
Yeah. Some head games. It makes it tough. Certain boards wouldn't have the same problems. Just the way that the starting hexes were set up sort of forced it. I think there's actually a number of different boards you can force that issue if you want to.
Yeah. More and more so, the more blocked or lethal or cover hexes are on, the more likely this is to happen.
Yeah. So some interesting play. Denial that you can score in any end phase is probably decent. I mean, denial's problem is always that you could only score it in the 3rd end phase. So
again, this is maybe not a championship card, but this is a card that's good, and it's a card that's great to have in there for head games, like we said, where like we're playing Nemesis, we're playing Rivals. There's actually a decent chance that this person might have Siegebreaker in there, in which case I might need to bomb somebody into their territory on like a suboptimal play.
Yeah, for sure. Any other objectives that you want to talk about? I mean, there's a number of really interesting ones, but I don't know that we need to go into all of them.
Yeah, we won't hit them all. There's more that they're worth playing and playing around. Yep. So it felt functional. I would occasionally have some in there that I was like, ooh, I'm not 100% sure I have a route to score this. Weirdly, the first game we played, I drew into 3 surges that all seemed like, I don't know if I can score this in the first round. There was bold sortie where you have to charge from your own territory or from an objective in your own territory. I'm like, well, I'm not on those yet.
Yeah.
So that's a round 2 one. Raw materials where you had to like place, this is the hardest one, and you place a feature and an enemy's out of action. Like that's a big ask to get somebody knocked down.
You could, if there's a feature token available, you could chop somebody in no one's territory and then place it under them using the plunder.
Yeah, but the plunder reaction only works if it's an objective token. Like it has to be one of the features that
man, that reaction is
looking at that, it makes me think that maybe we might see an errata on that, because that appears to be written as here's another way to get one down, and it's by killing somebody in that area.
You would hope, but I guess
yeah, that certainly makes this improves the possibility of this. I don't know, like it opens up some possibilities if that is
if it worked that way, but it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, the point being, I ended up with I was like, oh, hand of 3 surges. Yeah, it's go time. And I was like, actually, these are all great if I am playing in a later round. But
Yeah.
That is not one we're playing. And so that was the game where I had to kind of, I'm not going to do very much except score 4 glory in the end phase because conquer domain.
Yeah.
A card that has nothing to do with domain gambits, by the way. So
Yeah, definitely.
gambits. So these gambits all kind of generally play into that. There's a lot of stuff that is either to get you to that spot or to take advantage of that spot once you're there.
Yes.
I will lead off with one I didn't get to play, but this is takes some setup, but is real scary. This is opportunistic reprisal.
Oh yeah.
The reaction: play this after an enemy fighter's attack action. If that fighter is staggered, choose one friendly fighter. The chosen fighter makes one attack action that must target that enemy fighter. Great for a number of reasons. This deck includes several ways to stagger enemies. Tooth and Claw is out there, and people are voluntarily staggering people, especially with that last activation. Like, okay, well, it's super safe for me to just stagger myself, charge in. I'm savage. I can do savage objective things. Now, if you've got this in hand, you're like, yeah, sure. You know, I might get a fifth significant action out of this, particularly if you've got big fighters or range 2 fighters. Like if I had drawn this, when I was running the Cunning Crew, that extra reach makes it feel like real good. So,
yeah.
And you can think of this as the damage boost that this deck is lacking. Like an extra attack is kind of what they need to keep stacking up attacks.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me when reading this is realizing that it's not the fighter being attacked that has to make the attack.
Right. Yeah.
Use any fighter. So it's like, oh man, there's a lot of interesting play there. So yeah, I mean, free attacks I always like. I think that one's pretty good if you can set it up. The stagger is obviously the sort of part that makes it difficult, but there's ways to make that happen.
Yeah, this card on its own is like a argument for running range 2 and range 3 fighters with this.
Yeah,
with this warband.
Yeah, or some weapons that let you do that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and actually, one that felt really bad that you played against me and plays into this is a trap card that is in this deck called Gnarlwood Tusks.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a reaction that you play after an enemy fighter ends a move action adjacent to a feature token that is in the same hex as a friendly fighter. Mm-hmm. So you're on your feature token, you get charged, you react and play this out, and it staggers that enemy fighter. Mm-hmm. I was having to make some long odds charges where I probably wasn't even going to be able to kill anybody after the charge, and I was like, oh no. This fighter who's now in not safe position is also now getting rerolls against them. Felt real bad.
Yeah, and I was carrying around a grievous weapon, so it was like, okay, all the more chance that that's going to trigger.
Yeah, so I like that it's a trap that actually feels like a trap, but not like Slick Rock, where it's just busted. I think this will be pretty good. Like, there's a lot of situations where you do not want your charging fighter getting staggered.
Yeah.
So you'd have to be really careful to know, like, is this as safe of a charge as I think it is? I haven't seen that card yet.
Yeah.
I like anything that can deter attacks without having to do anything. It's the head game stuff. Right.
The ones, this is a head game that your opponent's not going to be involved with. It's almost an anti-synergy in the deck, where it's a thing where it's real useful if it comes out at the right time. There's a set of cards. There's a surge objective that wants you to charge from an objective in your territory. There's redeploy, which is amazing. It's a 4 hex push, but you have to be on a feature token in your territory and then end up on a feature token. And then another one that is lets you it's restricted to your leader. Is take your positions, choose up to 2 friendly fighters in your territory other than your leader, push each chosen fighter 1 hex towards the nearest feature token. These are great cards if you're not already set up in those spots that you want to be in. If you are, it's a nothing, right? Like, I had several times where I was like, oh, I'm kind of already where I want to be, and so this is dead or I'm in no one's territory, so this doesn't do anything. So not terrible, but it's a high payoff, low floor, high ceiling, low floor card. Can be amazing. Can also just be a nothing.
Yeah, I think of the two, yeah, I don't know. I guess, I mean, they're very different. I think I like redeploy better, but you're right. Like
Yeah.
they have great uses, and otherwise outside of those situations they're kind of just like meh.
I had a situation with redeploy where I was eyeballing it, and I was like, okay, I actually have I can have Doraz in a spot where I could use. I was like, I could use this, push him all the way into enemy territory. You had a feature token, I could go right around. 4 is a long way, and then these fighters that are kind of out of the way, I can scything them. So I was
Mm.
trying to engineer a way where I could make this happen, and then Doraz died. So never mind.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean it's interesting stuff, right? So cool cards, cool pushes, lots of utility,
Yeah,
does what you want. So
yeah.
um I think
Any other gambits you want to hit?
yeah, I think the only other one that I want to hit for right now is one that I like just because we don't have a lot of enemy pushes right now, and
Mm,
that's makeshift bombardment.
mm,
So there's a lot of setup for this, but like the payoff's pretty good. So you choose a friendly fighter that's on a feature token, and then you have to choose a enemy fighter that's visible to them within 3 hexes. So the within 3 hexes is pretty decent. That's a pretty decent range, but you can't just push anybody. So blocked hexes will mess this up. And then you get to choose one. You can either stagger them, which can be useful if you just need the accuracy boost, especially if you've got like a bunch of ranged fighters. I was, uh, the warband I was eyeing for maybe being good with this was Thundrix, and like
mm,
I was like, oh, stagger off of a ploy and then
totally.
light everybody up, like that feels pretty bad. Um, but and then the other option that you can do is push the chosen enemy fighter 1 hex away from the chosen friendly fighter.
Mm,
Now, having to push 1 hex away is not always great, but if you just need to push somebody off of a feature token, or, you know, just push somebody out of range,
sure.
having that option is always better than not. And we've lost a lot of our push enemy fighter options. So
Yeah.
I do like seeing more of them come back, but have some restrictions to make them something you have to think about. It's not just a distraction where you're just like, well, I get to push one of your fighters anywhere I want.
Yeah. Big agree. I think if this card was only one half or the other, not great. But because it has the flexibility of those, I really like this quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Ready to move on to some upgrades?
Yeah, let's do it. I will talk about one that that's cool that it's in this deck. It is a deck. It is a card that is only has any worth whatsoever if you are uh, using this deck as intent. You know, like using it
Mm-hmm.
either as rivals or leaning heavily into this mechanic with Nemesis. And this is
Yes.
Walking Wall. And this is for the purposes of cards with the Fearsome Fortress symbol. While this fighter is not on a feature token, this fighter is considered to be on a feature token, and this fighter's hex is considered to contain a feature token that cannot be flipped. Not exactly sure where the last part of that. I think that's just making it so that there's not head scratching moments.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll flip a feature token that I'm on that doesn't
yeah,
exist.
but at the right time, this is as simple as, hey, I'm getting an extra glory off of Conquered Domain,
Yeah.
and that's worth it on its own. It interacts with so many other things. You know, once you're in the right position, maybe you get guard, maybe you can trigger. You know, maybe you can use that bombardment. There's so many cards that interact with this, but it literally on it says it does not. You know, basically, it's a blank upgrade if you're interacting in any way with cards outside of this expansion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rivals nemesis only, basically, is what it says, unless you're leaning really heavily into this stuff for.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a champs build that leans this hard into that. I'd be
Yeah,
interested to see.
maybe. I feel like
I
you'd.
mean, the closer champs gets to Nemesis, then maybe.
Yeah. Debate topic. Debate topic.
Sure.
I mean, speaking of stuff that this combines with, um, one of the upgrades in here that I find really interesting and quite powerful is Stalwart Sentinel. And this is an
Mm,
upgrade that just says this fighter cannot be pushed by opponents' warbands while they are on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory. So 3 rows of the board where your fighter just cannot be pushed by enemy fighters. And since that's what you want this warband to be doing, it's pretty nice. Um, we've certainly seen plenty of situations in the past where not being able to be pushed ends up being much stronger than it seems.
mm.
Um, and I mean, just having another option for that feels good, even if it has a slight restriction to it.
Right. Yeah. Uh, that's as powerful as it gets. Is that cannot be pushed by an opponent's warband, like you said, because it's no dryback, it's no push from cards, it's none of that. But because it's an opponent's warband, you can still push,
Yes,
right? Like
very
you still
good.
have access to your side steps or whatever you've included, which is huge. There were archetypes that used this fighter cannot be pushed at all in some of the Beastgrave era, and I was like, yeah, I'll take that. Like that. I'm sure I can't push, but it's real powerful to know they're going to be where they're going to be. This is better than that. And like you said, we've
Yep,
seen other versions. Great.
absolutely.
There are some important pieces of tech here that give you a chance to maybe work this a little bit better. Bold Engineer +2 move except during a charge action. That's not super great, but reaction after a friendly fighter's activation. Pick one feature token in an empty hex adjacent to this fighter. Place that feature token in this fighter's hex. I actually was using this poorly. It
Yeah.
says after a friendly. It's not after this fighter's. It's after any friendly fighter's activation. You can do this thing. I was making this much more difficult than it needed to be. So after any friendly fighter does something, this bold engineer can pick up a feature token near it and slide it under itself. You are also placing that feature token for the purposes of other cards that might care about it. There's some objectives that
Yeah,
want it. So it's not a push, it's a pick up and place.
I missed that
Um,
as well.
yeah. So this is kind of a centerpiece. It's a key piece of this deck, and it opens up flexibility with what you're doing. Um, I found exactly that where like, gosh, like I really want to charge this guy, but I can't quite get there.
Yep.
It's a way to steal an objective from somebody. So you could charge, knock them off, and then or kill them, and all of a sudden that feature token is now empty, and you can bring it over to yourself. And again, that might be another glory if you are
Yeah,
conquered domaining. So
it certainly might be.
keep stacking it up.
Yeah. I think this really helps a lot of champ stuff too, because there's going to be situations where you just need to be able to move a hex under a fighter who's already done something, or you just don't have the action economy to get under
Sure.
enough objectives, and so you're like, well, I'll put bold engineer under this guy, move this guy over onto another objective, pull the one under my fighter, and
Yeah,
suddenly I'm
yeah.
on
I mean,
multiple.
think how prevalent drifting tides has been,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
this is maybe not quite as powerful as that, but pretty good.
Yeah, still solid. So
Yeah,
I like it.
yeah,
um there's a couple more in here that are good. I think I want to just touch on, I don't know. We kind of already mentioned Melding Stone. I think that's the one that I like the most. This is the one that makes
yeah. Go for it.
cover for objectives that within 2 hexes of the fighter. But I think that one that I actually like a little more, but it will be harder to pull off, I think, is Siege Master.
Mm,
Um, so this is a reaction upgrade. So after this fighter's activation, if this fighter is on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory, choose up to 2 friendly fighters on feature tokens. Now,
yeah,
importantly, they do not have to be, the friendly fighters chosen do not have to be on feature tokens within 1 hex of no one's territory. So
yeah,
opens up a lot of opportunity there. You give each of them a guard token.
yeah.
So
It could be yourself.
it
It's
could be
just not
yourself.
too
Yeah.
other. It's too
It's just
friendly.
too friendly. So I
It's this card on its own is why I was thinking about Morn Flight or Wraith Creepers. It was like,
yeah.
oh wow,
Yeah.
like if I play one of those Ghost Warbands, 2 dodge, we
Base two
start handing
dodge.
out guards.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
And then not being able to be driven back. So you stay on those feature tokens. And I mean, it's just, I think there's going to be a lot of play here, and if you care about having guard tokens, this is a quick way to get a bunch of guard tokens out. You could move, put out 2, go on guard, put out 2. Like there's
Go on guard. Go on guard. Reactive gave out 2 more guards.
yeah, I mean, like if that's what you care about doing is just being on guard, like yeah, there's a
Yeah.
world here where suddenly you're like, well, I can put my whole warband on guard after 1 activation. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? This is also a way that, like, if for some reason, if there's a strategy that, I mean, I know we're hinging all this around 1 upgrade, but like, if you are saying like, I really want there to be a lot of cover on the board, you can say with this guy, you can say like, okay, well then at the end of my opponent's power step, I'm going to delve these into. Um,
Oh,
oh wait, hold up.
sure.
Is this features? Feature token. Yeah, I'm going to delve these into cover tokens, cover hexes, and then on my turn, I'm going to do a thing, react, and
And
put
give
those guys on guard.
yeah.
And so
Oh, and
ditch their staggers, give them guard tokens, and now they're super defensive because
yeah.
they're guard and in cover.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a magical Christmas land, but I think it's one of those cards that we've said in the past, like keep your eye on this.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's enough that plays into like the be on guard hold strategy. Like I don't know if
Yeah.
there's enough payoff for doing that, but if there's a warband that cares enough about being on guard and holding, yeah, this is looking really good to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Last thing I'll say is there's another tech piece. This is Mason's Great Hammer. I actually ended up using this. So it's a 2 smash, 2 damage, cleave, grievous 1. That's not a terrible attack profile on its own.
No, that's solid.
That's solid. You're threatening 3 damage. It's one of the few sources of extra damage, especially if you happen to be like a more horde-y warband. It kind of saved my Truth Seekers game. Like I got this on Storm Rider. I was like, whew, I thought I was going to have to use that 1 damage bow for the rest of the game, but here I am whacking people with the hammer. But this also has a super weird reaction. After this fighter's activation, remove a feature token from this fighter's hex, then place another available feature token in this fighter's hex. So you could use this like, I'm on an objective. I'd rather it be cover. Let's do that. And but do it without having to delve it and stagger myself.
Yes.
You don't have to have made an attack. You just have an activation. The other thing you do is also it will place an objective token into the available tokens, and that will open up the plunder reaction.
True. Yeah, because you could remove the objective, put down a cover.
Yeah.
And then when you kill, yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Super in the weeds tech piece, but it's until we have no information one way or the other about this. But if things stay the way they are, there's not a lot of ways to make that happen. So
yep.
Yeah, and there's more fun stuff in there, but we tried to promise not to hit every single card. If you want to do that, we've already done that on the blog. Go check that out. What we're trying to get at is there's a lot of crazy bits and pieces in this, and it all functions together. I was kind of able to keep on working towards this plan of like, okay, let me keep working towards feature tokens where I want them in good spots. And some of the stuff that looked hard to do on the first kind of look through these cards was not quite as hard as we realized, not quite as difficult, because you had some tools to make some of this weirder stuff happen. That felt fun.
Yeah. I mean, it played really well. It'll be interesting to see it out in the wild, different warbands, different matchups. I think of the Rivals decks they've made so far, this is my favorite.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I can get on board with that. I'd agree. I think it's about time for us to wrap it up. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Okay. Do you have any more thoughts on either of these decks before we close out?
I think we've said enough for today. There's plenty more to delve into. There's like we said, we'll have a couple more deeper dive episodes coming up. So keep an eye out, and we will learn more about these guys.
Okay.
folks, let us know what you've learned too, because I think there's a lot to sort of chew on here.
Definitely. All right. Well, as usual, if you want to talk to us, you can talk to us at our Discord. We've been including a link in our show notes. You can get us at WTHcast or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. It has come to my attention. So we port this stuff over to a YouTube feed because we're purely audio. We don't actually get a ton of people on there, but we did get somebody asking like, "Hey, you said there was this link. It doesn't seem to work." For some reason, when this ports straight to YouTube, the HTML text doesn't do that thing. So if you need something, you can come check out the website. That's at themortalrealms.com. It's got all that same notes, and it's just it'll be linked there, or just ask us there, and I'll reply with the information you need, like I did for this fella. Thanks to the Mortal Realms for letting us be on the network. It's great, good place to be. The Warcry folks are working on some awesome stuff. They've got a lot of momentum going. Eric is, he's got some pictures of some things that he's working on that I'm really excited for that to get out in the world, and some other more ambitious projects. When that guy gets a creative bug going, it's pretty awesome to see.
Absolutely.
Coming up, so we brought this episode out early. We'll be back to an episode in 2 weeks' time. I think that means it's going to drop on Christmas Eve. So
yeah, fun.
But we'll be recording a little bit before that, obviously. What I'd like to do, if we can make it happen, is we'll get a bat rep going using some of this new stuff. So you get the blow by blow. We kind of hit some highlights of our game, but we'll get the rest of our team in on that, get their excitement and enthusiasm. I know Brian's excited to use the Looncourt. Maybe he'll really dig something in. If you really want to hear Nemesis, or if you really want to hear Rivals, or if you want to hear Championship Battle Report, let us know. We'll try to cater to that. Our main goal will be to try to play, use our extra numbers, leverage the extra assets we have to play multiple games, and pick one that is particularly entertaining for this, and bust that out.
Yeah.
And then there's still that discussion. If you want to hear us hotly debate some topic back and forth, let us know what's up. Which one is most interesting to you? We have, like, is ping good for the game? What do we think about Nemesis? What do we think about the way Championship is shaping up with these plot cards appearing so frequently? There's tons of content. I know Brian also threw out a what do we think about warbands, whether they should rotate or not. So I look forward to blood being drawn in those debates.
As any good follower of Corn would.
Yeah. I do have flavor text for you, Phil.
Ooh, all right. What do you got?
Okay. Snorbo's signal to advance sounds like a flatulent Trog boss, but it fills the Loon Knights with courage.
Does this sound the charge?
It is sound the charge, yeah. I figured you get that pretty easy, but it was an entertaining enough quote that was.
I hadn't actually read that one.
All right.
But I was like, it can only be one card. But I had no idea that they had said that. That's funny.
Yeah. We're going to go with the Queens of the Stone Age song for your recommended listening, and that is a song called Fortress. You can check that out. We always keep that Spotify playlist together. That's going to do it for What the Hex. I've been Davey.
And this is Phil.
Almost did it. Almost. That was almost 2 seat of the pants. Yeah. All right. Saved it. Yeah, I got as far as welcome to